How you doing? I'm Perrin. Welcome to my studio. I'm running Cubase over here, and I've been using Cubase since I was about 17 years old, and I love it. And it gives me, you know, a really unique sound amongst my friends and fellow musicians. Yeah, it does everything I need really, and I've just enjoyed using it for this whole time, and I feel like it's really quick for me to get my idea down and chop it up and execute it. I started off as a beat producer, so just making like hip hop tunes on an MPC, sampling a lot, and then moved on from sampling to try and create my own samples, and then collecting gear and microphones, realizing that they have such a big part in your sound too. Like combination of microphone is like as good as a plug-in, you know, or in my eyes, like an ear's better for sure. It's like realizing that like each microphone is its own EQ, so it's like got that certain sound or character that you can that you can capture. And if you know the microphones well, you know how to set them up and to get the sounds that you want to achieve. So I used Cubase on the mixing of Talk Tomahawk and Choose Your Weapon, which are two hiatus Coyote releases, and it's been great. It never crashed. I had like multiple layers on that, on those projects, especially Choose Your Weapon. This is one of my original songs. It's got a bit going on. It's not as extreme as some of the other ones I've worked on, but this studio is kind of bringing out other sounds for me, because it's completely dead. So I've usually just been recording in bedrooms and every bedroom, and I feel like that is one of the you know, advantages of being a studio, like an engineer, like, or a beat maker or whatever, a composer. Like in your bedroom, you know, that's the thing that gives you your unique sound, and no one else in the world would have that sound because they don't have your bedroom. So I just reckon that's the best way to get an original sound, is just utilize what you have around you, because you know, no one else will have that. So on this particular track, the percussion is, it's a sequence. It's a loop, but it's like I played it all and kind of edited it how I you know, to try and get the right sounds more so than the actual playing, because like I feel like that's one thing I've been trying to work on so much, is just tone, and like that's what I've been practicing on the drums, especially just because like you'll play it one part, and then if you've done 4 or 5 takes, you know, if you listen to the first take, it's a different sound in the snare drum than the 5th take. So editing, it becomes if you want to do that, it becomes really tricky. So you have to try and match up the sounds. So yeah, I've been focusing a lot on that, and I can edit, and I do have the edit chops, but I prefer not to do that. I prefer just to like nail the take, and I've been trying to do that. Yeah, and it's the whole song kind of transforms into a different feeling like after this section, and that's like a whole other bunch of sounds. But a lot of the sounds that I'm getting are on the way in, as I was saying before, with like microphones, and I'm using the UAD stuff to get some sounds on the way in, like some just basic compressors and EQs to help hone in the sound that I'm trying to create. Yeah, I just like would start with playing a riff. You know, like a lot of it is just me trying to work out how to play the guitar, and then so I get really excited by almost any chord at some stages, but not so much anymore. But when I first start playing any instrument, I have a lot of patience with it, and then I can hear things that I wouldn't necessarily hear like after, like it's like the drums, for instance. I know the drums, that's probably the instrument that I know the best out of the ones that I play. So I struggle to like be content with a simple idea, you know. So you know, like that's like, yeah. So that's something to work on, and I think that's a hard thing for musicians that know a lot about their instrument to do, is just to keep it really simple and just serve the song. So yeah, it's like this song, it started off with the guitar and then a bass line, and I'm usually doing drums and percussion rhythmical sides last. So I make sure I try and make the harmony and get the melody strong, and then and then I put on the drums, because I feel like I can kind of like fit. I hear it. I hear the space without any percussion in there, and then just I can kind of choose how I want it to sound, and then I'll position the microphones accordingly. So like with this setup here, that was for a song recently that I was trying to get for a while, and I didn't really want to do this, so I was kind of being lazy about it and trying to do it with all these other approaches. I've tried like a bunch of different things, like percussion, hand drums, close mic'd hand drums. So when I first started playing guitar, I just started, I had it on my lap and I just tapped it, and with distortion and stuff, and that was like, I felt like that was going to be my guitar style. So I've got a couple of songs with that vibe, and that's what one of them is this.
Happy Thursday evening. I know we're a week late. I apologize. We got caught up in the holiday thing again at Yamaha, but I'm so happy. I'm in such a good mood. I had some vacations. I went to the East Coast, which was beautiful. Drove, long drive, but it's nice out there. Camped, so amazing. Little Airbnb stuff, so good. But that's not the only reason I'm happy. We got a puppy. His name is Wallace. You can call him Wally if you're friends with him. He's a pretty cute little guy. He's going to be big, though, just like the last one, but he's going to be big. Anyway, in a future episode, I will introduce you to Wally. But so many reasons to be in a good mood. Another reason is because you can follow Steinberg sessions and our Yamaha 440 sessions on this very cool Yamaha Canada Solutions Facebook page. Also happy because next week, Thursday, September 9, we're doing episode 3 of the Yamaha 440 sessions, and it's all about bass, and in particular Ampeg. I did some very cool interviews with some great bass players. Drew Burston, who plays with Sultans of String, and he's played with Chantal Korviasek and a whole bunch of people. And this other great guy, Manny D, who plays all over the place, and they shared all their insights on the bottom end. So that'll be a lot of fun. I'm kind of excited about another thing. You know, I was talking about this the last couple times that we got together, and I finally made it happen. Check this out. Do you see anything new? Do you see anything new and exciting in this rack? There's going to be a test at the end, so you better check it out. Okay, I'm going to go back. Check it out. Do you see anything new in this rack? Of course you do. Remember we were talking about acquiring a new compressor. It showed up. So thanks to my friends at YSL Pro for hooking me up and helping me get it. It is a Rupert Neve 535, and holy moly, it lives. It's way better than I thought. It's based on an old vintage Neve 2254, which if you've been in a big studio, you've probably seen before. But Universal Audio has a plug-in which we can pull up when we get into the session here. But this is kind of a modernized version of the 2254, and it's crazy. So the new vocal chain, for those that are keeping score, is the API preamp first here into the API EQ. Then we go Rupert Neve 535. Then we go down to the Crane Song. And then we go right in here on the AXR4. So really excited about this compressor. Oh my goodness, it's so good. It's really, really good. I can't emphasize how good it is. It's maybe one of my favorite compressors I've ever used. Anyway, I have another reason why I'm in a good mood tonight and I'm so happy. It's because I'm bringing you a song that I'm so happy with. It's the first song off Siobhan, my daughter's upcoming EP. And we wrote the song, her and I, together. And there's a little story behind that, which we'll get to in a second. But this was a bit of a departure for us and a bit of a new direction. And it was really fun, and it was really different. And the reason we're talking about it tonight is because I went on a bit of a journey with this song. And I actually struggled for a really long time, which I don't often struggle with songs, particularly my daughter's songs, because, you know, I've known her since she was born, and we work together all the time, and, you know, everything is within my control, and, you know, it's a thing that is usually pretty straightforward. This time, because we were trying to do something a little different and push the envelope a little bit and go into some new directions, we've been listening to a lot of stuff like Billie Eilish and Olivia Rodrigo, all the stuff that is popular in the top 40 these days. And, you know, there's a definite thing happening. And so we were influenced by that, but we didn't want to do exactly that. We wanted to kind of do that, but next, like what's coming next. So in any case, really happy about it. I'm going to take you on the journey, because whether or not the music or the song is your thing, that doesn't matter, because I learned so much producing and mixing this one that I think regardless of the type of music that you like to produce, I think you probably at some point will struggle like I did, or maybe you're just better than me and you won't struggle at all. But I think we all struggle at some point. So anyway, let's not spend too much time talking. Let's listen to the tune, and then we'll start digging into a little bit. So here we go. Let's go to the session. And this is called Think It's Gonna Rain Today. Here we go.
Away, I sit and wait. This could turn to hate, or on another day we could find a way to keep our thoughts for. Thought I had it all, but I'm afraid to fall. I'm feeling like a fool who's falling for another tool who's calling. I think it's gonna rain today. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy, May. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say. I think it's gonna rain today. I think it's gonna rain today. Shot in the dark, won't get too far. True colors are, or set in the light, starting to write. It begins tonight on RESPX. I could be a mess. I'm feeling like a fool who's falling for another tool who's calling. I think it's gonna rain today. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy, May. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say. I think it's gonna rain today. I think it's gonna rain today. My emotions, way won't take the bait with you. I anticipate, not feel insane with you. It's gonna rain, and I'm feeling dizzy tonight. My head is so heavy, and I'm feeling dizzy, man. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say. I think it's gonna rain.
All right, so let's dig in here. So one of the things when we listened to a lot of these new artists, let me go back to full screen here. One of the things that we noticed was that a lot of the modern stuff, the vocal is really up front, like it's really loud and maybe distractingly loud. But the other thing we noticed is that the track has basically no top end, like zero top end, like no treble whatsoever, which is kind of cool. But can be challenging because, you know, a lot of great sounds have a little high frequency content. So there's that. And the other thing that we, you know, sort of noticed with a lot of the new stuff is that there's very, very few parts. Like for those of us of a certain vintage, you know, things were much more fully produced and layered back in the day. And so for a lot of these new productions, very, very few parts. But there's a caveat to that, and there's something that goes along with that, which is that even though there are fewer parts, each part is of paramount importance. Like every little tiny nuance in your track becomes really important, like so important. So we set out to do the other two songs that Siobhan and I have released. We had kind of done sort of a mix of some new things, but you know, maybe a little bit of an old style production, just to sort of establish things. But in this one, we really wanted to try to look at the way that these things are being done, again, without copying and without being too derivative. So we knew the track was going to have lots of vocals up front. We knew that the track was going to be a little darker than maybe usual. We knew it was going to have less elements, and we knew that each element was going to be looked at and worked and made to be really, really important and compelling. So the story behind writing this song, you know, at Yamaha, sometimes we have long days, as I'm sure many of you do in your jobs that you might have during the day, or even if you make music for a living. I know because I did that for most of my life, and you can have some really long days. So in any case, Yamaha, we have some long days, and there was this one particular day, shortly after the grand piano that we have upstairs just had arrived and was sitting in the living room. And so I was tired, and all I wanted to do was just sit down at the piano and just improvise and play my little, you know, tinkle piano bits and just drift off into Neverland and kind of forget about my day. Well, I started playing this thing, and Siobhan heard it, and she comes racing into the room, and she's like, "Dad, I love that. Let's write a song." And of course I was like, "Oh, I'm so sleepy right now, Siobhan. I don't know if I'm up for this." And she didn't listen to me. You know, I'm not sure how much she listens to me anymore. But anyway, so, you know, here we go. We're writing a song. And this was the song it turned out. When we first started, the piano part was just this over and over again, which should tell you a lot about, you know, how sleepy I was, because all I could handle was 2 chords. So this was basically what the piano part was. Now, as you can see, that's not in the song very much. It's only very much at the end. So we went about reinventing that piano part and trying to turn it into something completely different. And so we experimented with a lot of things, you know, started with the dark piano and made it super dark, and then distorted it and tried a whole bunch of things. And then I found that the coolest thing after a lot of experimenting was just to kind of make it staccato. And so this became the backbone for the entire song, was just that same piano part, but without any sustain. Let's have a listen to that. Now, this is actually a piano sound in the plug-in Ivory that I sort of edited and messed around with until I came up with this sound. So that sort of set us in the direction that this track led us in. And then the next thing that we thought would be cool to add was just to keep the rhythm of the part going, because it's such a slow tune. The BPM is, I think, 76 BPM, so it's very slow. So we wanted consciously to make sure that we had a rhythmic element. So I added this delay to the piano, but the delay is processed through, in the intro I showed you, I found this free cassette tape plug-in that you can do all this crazy wow and flutter stuff. Highly recommended, check it out. But anyway, so this delay is processed through a whole bunch of crazy things, and let's hear what that sounds like. So initially we had this through the whole song. It was all the way through, and it was really cool. We liked it, but in the end we decided that we missed that piano part. So the original piano part. So we added it, and so at the end all three parts are going in the background like this. Okay, and for me, because that was sort of the meat of the song, saving it until the end is so satisfying. I look forward to it every time I listen now, because it gives me this big full thing, which is the original conception of the song. So then there was this little melody that we kind of came up with again while we were writing. We weren't quite sure how to use it, and so originally we had it all the way through as part of this repeating pattern. But as you can see, this is the track here. We just sort of found the place where it worked, which was mostly just in the chorus. And again, I even took it out of the end. So here is this little piano thing. And keep in mind the song is Think It's Gonna Rain. And so this little piano part is sort of meant to emulate rain with a piano. So have a listen. And of course, it was nice in a couple of places to add a delay to that. So here it is with the delay. Now, as I started to copy and paste these things around and to try to move them through the song and sort of shape it, I was in a big rush when I was doing that, and it turned out that some of the places where I pasted the piano, this little melody piano delay, weren't actually where it was supposed to be, but it actually ended up kind of being a cool thing. So you can hear in the first chorus here, by the time we get to here, the delay is on its own, and it sounds like a little synthesizer thing, which is pretty cool. Here it is. And again. So we got a lot of mileage out of this little part. The other thing you'll notice is that in these high melody parts, I didn't clean them up very well, like that you can hear kind of the sustain of a previous take bleeding through. But that was kind of inspired by one of Siobhan's favorite producers is Phineas, who is Billie Eilish's brother, and he produces all her music, and he also has a solo career himself. And he has this incredible knack for leaving things that sound like mistakes and sound like problems, and this is a theme that's going to come up again in this song. But so we were very inspired by that sort of mistake that's supposed to be there sort of approach to this all. So so we left some things a little unclean, like we didn't clean the tracks like we normally would, and there's little things that happen here and there that were left in intentionally, but were inspired by the mistake that we made. So another thing to keep in mind. Okay, so the next challenge was drums, and the only thing that I knew for sure was that I wanted the kick drum to follow the pattern of that original piano part. So I searched for a kick drum for so long, and finally landed on this one, which isn't actually the sound it was, because then I EQ'd it and compressed it and distorted it and did all these things to it. But I wanted something that was really low and didn't have a whole lot of sort of, we call it point, which is the trebly bit to it. And I wanted it to feel a bit like a heartbeat. So this was the sound that we ended up with. Now, that gets uninteresting pretty quickly. So then, again, after listening to a whole bunch of music that we were using as reference and whatever, I got inspired by tom sounds, and I came up with this little tom part. It's called Little Tom, of course. But again, where the challenge in the drums happened was I created the kick drum sound first, but then what ended up happening is when I added this little tom sound, I was just improvising and playing things over it. The tom had more bottom end than the kick drum, and it wasn't playing in the places that, you know, I would expect the kick drum type instrument to be. And I had it laying on top of the kick drum sometimes, and it was creating all this crazy low end conflict. And so I had to figure that out. We didn't want this to sound too big. We wanted it to be deep, but not like a massive sound. So it was a little bit tricky. Anyway, we kept going. And so I ended up, when I was doing it, I added this other part too. So I'll add these two little parts, little tom midge here. And again, this little tom thing that I had more low frequency than the kick drum. And at some points in the tune, I had all three of these elements going. So there was a real challenge. But let's go to a place where you can hear the kick drum, the little tom, and little tom midge. Here it is here. So that little doo, that's little tom. And here comes little tom midge. Sounds like a Simmons tom. Anyway, so when I was mixing, the challenge for this was figuring out what could go where, because again, when I first was working on it, I was copying things throughout it and trying to figure out what worked best. But once I had everything placed and I didn't have things laying on top of each other that were kind of canceling each other out, then I had to figure out the hierarchy of what is the kick drum and what are these extra parts. And so I decided that the kick drum was going to have the most low frequency. I decided that little tom, even though a couple of times it plays a kick drum part, was going to have the least low frequency, and little tom midge would live somewhere in between because it was in the chorus. I thought that extra low end would be good in the chorus. So anyway, what you hear is sometimes when little tom takes over from the kick drum, it sort of lifts the bottom end. All of a sudden we lose the bottom end for a little bit, and this kick drum part is played by this sort of trebly thing that I EQ'd quite radically. And it sort of created this kind of cool thing. We'll listen back to all this in a second, but let's keep going. So then we wanted some sort of a snare drum, but we wanted it to be really, really small. And so we just I found this sample in Native Instruments Battery, which was perfect, and I really liked it. But then the question became, where does it sit in the like in the level, in the mix? Is it loud, like a lot of modern stuff, that snare drum is really loud, or is it just kind of like a little tiny thing? And so I did some automation, like it's way down in the verse, it's up in the chorus, but the verses it's down, let's see, it's down almost 6 dB. So anyway, so let's add that into the mix here. So it almost sounds like someone tapping something, but that's our snare drum. Anyway, what you can hear when we get all the sounds in, I'll move it ahead to the second verse where there's more little tom. You get this cool kind of like up, down, medium, down, low, high. You know, it's sort of the percussion bits kind of go up and down. And actually, when we realized after the fact, when we listened back, we realized they kind of sound like water drops. And that was kind of a neat revelation, especially for a song about rain. So anyway, here is, you can hear this little bit again. Little Tom Midge is coming in here. So, what's the point of all this? Well, for those of us that have worked with real drums a lot, or even when we programmed drums, you know, sort of did it in a traditional way where the kick is low and there's a big snare and there's a hi-hat and a crash cymbal and, you know, sort of the traditional approach to it. When I sat down to mix this, my traditional approach simply did not work. I had to find a new way to do it. And so this levels idea, high, low, medium, like all these little kind of colors that pop out, was the breakthrough on this one that helped me. And so I guess the takeaway that I'm trying to impart to my friends in Steinberg land is that sometimes reimagining how you approach mixing, not just drums, but any element, and sort of trying to hear them a slightly different way can lead you to a place that's really interesting and maybe make for a better mix. We'll keep going with the drums. So, you know, the 80s guy in me wanted a big snare drum in here every once in a while. And so we added this, and initially it was dry, but, oh, I didn't turn it on. Here we go. We'll get it next time. Here it is. Initially it was dry, and just this kind of, and it just kind of sat there, and the song has such a nice bounce. And again, thinking of the water idea, it needed a wash, and so we went looking for a long reverb and ended up at this one. But then it just kind of sat there, and because all the percussion is moving up and down and high, low, in between, we felt like the reverb needed to move as well. And so the plugin I used is the Manny American reverb, which is incredible. I'll show it to you here. It allows you to phase the reverb trail, and it's got EQs, and it's got a compressor and distortion, and you know, all the normal stuff that you would want to use with a reverb. But this is a special plugin, especially for anything kind of bright and shiny and modern. It works great in rock. It's great for vocals. I use it on a lot of mixes, but it was the perfect thing in this because I was able to get that long tail, but I was also able to get a little bit of phaser. And let's have a listen to that again. So in the mix, it's pretty subtle, but I think it does a really cool thing. And I can tell you that that's maybe the second or third time in my life that I've used phasing on a reverb. It's not a thing I do very much. So again, I was really stepping out of my comfort zone for that. So then we got to the bridge, and I didn't want to overuse our little, snare sound, which was kind of that small thing. And I thought we needed to do something else. And, anyone that has known me for a long time in any program track knows that I love a big hand clap. But the operative word is big. And this tune, everything was small. And so I went on a hunt for a small little hand clap we could add into the bridge. And it sounds like this. And super dark, like I EQ'd all the high end out of it. So very dark, and again, decidedly dry. I tend to like a hand clap to sound roomy and big, and we wanted this to be small, dark, and dry, and so we did that. But then the 80s guys showed up again, and I thought, what if I used that same reverby snare drum in the bridge? So I moved it, and then I was like, yeah, but now I'm overusing this beautiful phasing reverb, so can't do that. So what we ended up doing was this, and we added sort of a deeper, darker sort of sound to it, and it's here, but it's the same snare drum sound. Now, for any of you that are listening on headphones, you'll notice that it's kind of like split between your two ears. And again, that was intentional. We wanted it to sound a little uneven, and the reverb is kind of off to a side and the drum is off to the other side. And so there's that. But anyway, no other real percussion elements in this except for, and I left it in here muted, water drop. And that came from the click. So it was a funny little thing that happened. And again, in the spirit of allowing mistakes to live in a track, we had the click that from when I had originally put down the scratch piano part. And any of you that have been around for a while, I have a click in my template, and it's like a wood block kind of sound. And so I had that. And once we started having the track come in place, because there's some stops and starts in this, I edited the click track so that the click wasn't there during the musical parts, but in the stops, just to provide a time, the click would come in. So there was little remnants of the click hanging around throughout. And so anyway, there's this big stop in after the first verse going into the first chorus, which we can check this in it. We'll check it out. Actually, we'll check it out right now. And the click was just kind of hanging out there, by accident. And I had it there, and I actually liked it. It was kind of on the upbeat. So we ended up leaving it in for a long time. It was there. But anyway, here's the space that we're talking about.
One of the two who's coming. I think it's gonna rain today.
So there's the big space, and the click came in. It's muted right now, but let's see if I can turn it back on here. So it was right here.
One of the two who's coming. I think it's gonna.
So very subtle. You might not have even heard that. Let me turn it way up. I can do that because we're not using it anymore. But anyway, it was right here.
One of the two who's coming. I think it's gonna.
So just a little upbeat, and it sort of provided this sort of propulsion to the chorus, which I thought was cool. Anyway, after we had played it for all the folks that live in the house, they were like, what is that little sound? It sounds like a water drop, and maybe it would be cooler if it actually was a water drop. So I found a little water drop sound, and we added it as a water drop right here.
think it's gonna rain today.
And it's again a beautiful happy accident because it happens right before the first time that Siobhan says, I think it's gonna rain today. So we get water drop, I think it's gonna rain.
Oh, I know that who's calling. I think it's gonna rain today.
Anyway, I used it again later because I had the click track in this little tiny drum fill that goes into the final chorus, but I ended up replacing the click there with the water drop as well. Now, I'm one who tends to think, oh, sound effecty things like that can sort of verge on cheesy and, you know, maybe it's something to be careful with. And I still feel that way. However, I think in this case, it's subtle enough, and when you listen back to the mix, it's so quiet that I think it's fine, and I think it works okay. So anyway, so we're going to leave it in, and I hope that you all like it, and I hope that you'll go on to Spotify and Apple Music and all the streaming services and listen to it over and over again so Siobhan can get paid. Anyway, okay, let's move on to something else. Again, a real departure for me because there's not very much bass in this. And the bass that is here is really quite strange, frankly. And so for those of you that were around for the episode with Kevin Cronin, film composer, he talked about saving the low frequency for a really important part of the song. And we had already written this song and we were already working on it, and ding, the light went on in my head, and I was so inspired by Kevin, and I don't know if he's here tonight, but I told him that we were going to talk about him. So Kevin inspired us, and in particular with this song, because I knew it wasn't going to have very much bass, if any bass. And he inspired us to save the low frequency for the biggest part of the song, which was the bridge. So let's dig in here. So in the verses here, there is no low frequency content other than the kick drum. So let's have a listen here.
Million miles away, I sit and
Nothing.
wait. This could
No.
turn to hate, or on another day we could find a way to keep our thoughts for. Thought I had it all, but I'm afraid to fall. I'm feeling like a fool who's falling for another tool who's calling.
No bass until here.
I think it's gonna rain today. My head is so heavy and I'm
Now, even this bass is strange because it's not even really marking the chords. It's more like just an ostinato part, a repeated part that involves notes from both of the chord changes that we're using here. And sound-wise, I went for stuff that was a little bit different, not typical bass sounds. And we'll come back to Kevin in a second. But anyway, let's have a listen to what's happening here in the bottom end. So because it was sort of a bass part, but not really a bass part, again, I had to go on quite a journey to find the sound. And the first one I landed on is this synclavier bass. And for those of you that have been around for a while, synclavier is a very famous synthesizer that was used on a lot of electronic music and popular music in the 80s, and was very, very expensive, and it's now available in an Arturia plugin, and it's really cool. I don't use it all that much because a lot of the sounds in it to me sound very dated, but I thought this was going to be extra special cool. So here is I'm using two sounds to make up this. One is kind of the low frequency content, which is this synclavier sound, and then there's this other crazy sound on top of it. So let's just hear this sound on its own. This is the synclavier, which is providing the low part of the bass sound. Super 80s. Now, why did I like it? Because it's a bit wobbly, and there's a definite attack there, but it's not so attacky that it's going to interfere with my high-low, medium-high-low drum part. So again, that's the synclavier bass part. Now, on its own, let's hear that part without the crazy sound I added on top. So let's hear it. I liked it, but I just felt like we needed some dirt. The song was so clean and so beautiful, and I think it's still beautiful, and I like that it's beautiful. But I just felt like with, again, a lot of this modern stuff has some dirt in it. So we went looking for dirt, but we'll come back to that. Let's hear the chorus here with just the synclavier bass.
I think it's gonna rain today. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy. May all the consequences, Tim, I'm so restless, they say.
Cool, but a little too 80s for me. Just, I like it, but it was like, it took it to a place that I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go back to the 80s. I like that influence, but I didn't want it to sound like a track that was produced then. So we went looking, and this sound is from the Synthy, which is another Arteria instrument, which is this really cool, crazy, I don't know if I still have it in the session here. I probably do. You can see I used a whole lot of instruments. Okay, here is this is what the Synthy looks like. And I actually, when I was in high school, my school had one of these. And, you know, we've all seen modular synthesizers where you plug patch cords in to make the sound. Well, this had these little pins, like, from like some kind of 80s like board game, and you would have to like pin them to make the sound. So anyway, so I found this sound in here and I just loved it. And I loved it because it was so weird. And I'm gonna zoom in here on the track because you can see I did a bunch of kind of editing and automating and you know, and you'll understand why in a sec. But let's just have a listen to this sound on its own. It's just this really crazy thing that probably wouldn't have worked on its own, but you can hear it. It's got those little things that... And I just loved all this random weird stuff. And now, when I put it in the track without the synclavier, it just didn't have enough bottom end. It was cool.
My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy. May all the consequences, Tim, I'm
so cool, but just not enough foundation for me. So the mix of the two was amazing.
My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy. May all the consequences, Tim, I'm so restless.
Now, here's the thing, is that I wanted these parts to sound, I wanted there to be something about it that was not a little random. So as you can see by looking here, sometimes the synclavier, the first note, plays by itself. Sometimes it has the Synthy with it. And the problem I was having was, much as I love this sound with all those little random things that were happening, it became a bit too much. And particularly under the vocal, it was taking my ear away from the vocal. So I went to work and I edited out some of the random stuff, that, as you can see, and I made sure that the those little things didn't happen under the vocal. I saved them for in between the vocal phrases. So if you check it out, and then I turned them down. You can see I turned them down a little bit just so they weren't as prominent. But they were loud for a long time because I liked them so much. But anyway, here's the end result. And you can hear that the randomness disappears under the vocal, but it appears again in between the vocals.
My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy. May all the consequences, Tim, I'm so restless, they say. I
Now, the cool thing about it is that not each time that happened, it was the same. Like there was a randomness to it, which I loved. So I rendered out the whole track, and I made sure that I left everything in place the way it was, because it was a bit unpredictable how it was. So the second verse is actually, or the second chorus is actually different than the first chorus because of the randomness of it. And then at the end of the song, when my piano part comes in, the original piano part is here, I actually took out all that random stuff because the piano is so beautiful and big, and I just wanted to hear the bass riff underneath the piano, and so the end sounds cleaner than the rest of the song.
This is love. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say.
And then it drops out. So again, back to that original thing that we talked about at the very beginning, which is you know, trying to make the most out of each little part in this, trying to make each part really important and special and evolve and not just be a loop that repeats. And we'll get to more of that stuff in a sec. So, thank you, Kevin. We're at the part here, the bridge, which was the biggest part. And even though we have some low frequency and we have this dancing little bass ostinato, there's no real boom for the low end. And for those that were there for Kevin's session, there was his example. He hits this low subnote and wah. So Kevin inspired this. And when we got to the bridge, I thought, I wonder what it sounds like if I just hit that synclavier and just hold low notes as low as it will register. And so that's what we did. Then what I did was I kept that synthy part going, but I changed the waveform in the sound that I had. And so with a slightly different waveform, it changed the sound and it made it a little crappier and more distorted. And the random stuff changed a little bit. And so in this bridge part, because it's sort of a wide open, expansive part, I left all the random weird stuff in, and as a matter of fact, the last time it goes through on the very last chord, I even turned this up by almost a decibel because I liked it so much. So we'll turn off the synthy and we'll hear going into the bridge just with that low synclavier. Thanks, Kevin. Here we go.
I think it's gonna rain today. My emotions, I won't take the pain with you. I anticipate, I feel the same with you. Think it's gonna rain today.
Now, the beautiful thing about this, which I didn't hear when it almost comes off like a different sound, because when I was playing those short little ostinatos in the chorus, it has that plucky 80s kind of vibe to it. But when you hold it down, there's a lot of movement and wobble. And actually, I EQ'd some of it out, but there's a lot of high frequency kind of air in the sound. So let's just hear it on its own. So very cinematic, again. Lots of motion, and that was my favorite part of it. Anyway, so very cool. So here's the synthy part with the other sound. So I'll leave just the end of the chorus here so you can hear the difference in the waveform. So here's what was the difference. So it just comes forward. It's a little brighter and crappier. Super random. Love it. And then turned up? Yeah, because it was so good. But anyway, all together. So here's the two bass parts together, and then we'll play. Here's the... So it sounds like an electronic thing is kind of crapping out or something, and I just love this. Anyway, good to experiment, because sometimes finding sounds and approaches to sounds that you don't normally use, you end up with some really cool and interesting stuff. Okay, let's hear those bass sounds in the context of the whole thing.
I think it's gonna rain today. My emotions way won't take the bait with you. I anticipate not feeling safe with you.
Oh, I got the synthy muted. That's not
I
fair.
think
Here we
it's
go.
gonna rain today. My emotions way won't take the bait with you. I anticipate not feeling safe with you. It's gonna rain today.
And the only other element in this bridge is this BBC Symphony Orchestra. It's from Spitfire. I think it's called Spitfire Instruments. Check it out. They do these really interesting, weird and wonderful. There are a lot of free instruments, and check it out. They're pretty amazing. So anyway, this was just the pad. And again, I just marked this when we wrote the song, and it just ended up doing exactly the right thing, and added some tape warble to it just so that it sort of lived somewhere between a real orchestra and a weird 80s synth. And so it sounds like this. So all I'm doing is marking the chord down the arpeggio. That's it. But it creates this incredible suspense through this section.
I think it's gonna rain today. My emotions way won't take the bait with you. I anticipate not feeling safe with you. It's gonna rain today.
And I think it offsets the sort of random and crappiness of that bass part. I think the fact that it's very still, there's motion in it, and I think the motion in that sound kind of goes well with the motion in the synclavier, and I think, I don't know, to me it just is really working really well, that thing. Okay, on to the vocals. I think we've covered everything in the track. On to the vocals. They were recorded with, did I mention, the new compressor? Holy moly, it's good. Anyway, both Siobhan and I, after we recorded it, were just like, holy cow, pretty fantastic. And so the thing I want to say about this vocal, and I won't go too deep into the processing because I've talked about vocal processing a lot before, but all we did to get this vocal, and it sounds like there's layers and a lot of different things, but all we did was basically just record takes, just from top to bottom. And then we found some brilliant parts, and actually this vocal was kind of assembled from the parts that we just knew that we loved and we didn't want to live without. And so all these background parts, some of them Siobhan didn't even necessarily sing where they are. We actually just went through all the vocal takes, found the things that we liked, and then just moved them around until we placed them. And again, I tend to be someone who, when I record vocals, I want a specific thing in a place, and we work on it until we get it. And again, a very different approach. We sang no harmonies. We sang no doubles. They just, anything that's here happened a little bit by accident. And again, there are some sort of jagged entries to vocals and things, and you know, some of the tails on the vocals I left untuned because I just thought they sounded real and authentic. And again, that's very much in the spirit of a lot of the stuff that you hear these days. So, and I think it suits. That's a very beautiful, clean vocal, but I think the little things in it that are natural, I think, complement all of the aspects of the track that are different. So, so we'll listen back one more time before we go. But just a couple more things I wanted to mention. So, after I sent this around to some friends of mine, a couple people said, "Hey, like maybe the second verse could be a little different than the first verse," and it already is. We had done some different things in the drums and all that, but the last conversation that I had with Devin Lougheed about it inspired me to really look at the second verse again. And it's turned out that the solution for it was, if we go back to that original piano part, all I did was take out the delay bit. So in the first verse, we've got the piano and the delay. And in the second verse, we just have just that weird piano by itself. You can see it's muted right here. Now, the cool serendipitous thing about that is that all the extra things that we had done to the second verse were in all the high, medium, low drum bits, and there were some random, and I displaced some things, and so the groove was a little different, and it was really a section about the groove. And so by taking away this groovy delay element, we actually opened up the section so you can really feel the groove in that second verse a little bit more. Okay. I just want to say we'll listen back. I don't know if there are any questions. There's nothing here yet from JG. Hello, JG. She's with us again tonight. She was on vacation as well, and we've all had vacations. So when we look at the vocals here, you can see it's all these green and yellow bits. So there's the main track, and you know, you can see that they're just like these blobs that I just moved around. And placed where I thought they would work, and they all have different amounts of reverb and different amounts of processing so that they sit in a different place. In the verse, you'll hear some weird reverb some weird delays right here. These sounds, and I did this with a UAD plugin. It's a Korg delay, and I intentionally set it so that it wasn't in time. And it had all kinds of crazy modulation. And then I actually printed it, and then I edited it to get this. So you get these couple little repeats that are kind of neat. So that one sounds pretty normal, but they get weirder as we go. So that's a little funky. And so they're just kind of these little... And again, to make the expansiveness of the bridge bigger, I added this tape delay, which I rolled all the top end off. So it just makes that really long. And again, not necessarily with the beat of the song. I just wanted like a rainy, raindrop, stormy thing over top of it. Okay, last bit, and then we'll play it out for everybody. On the 2 mix, let's listen to this. I did a couple of things, and you know, we talk about plugins, and there's lots of cool ones, and we end up talking a lot about Waves and Universal Audio, which clearly are a couple of my favorites. However, there's another company called Plugin Alliance, and they have a sale right now. This is September 2nd, 2021, and I think it only goes for a couple more days. So if you watch this down the road and you're looking for a Plugin Alliance sale, it's probably over unless you get to it in the next 2 days. But they make all kinds of really cool... Brainworks is a company that makes a lot of these plugins. And I had a few of their free things, but I decided to use the sale to get a couple of things that really had a huge impact on this song. This purple MC77 is like an 1176 compressor, but this is the most amazing sounding 1176 plug-in I've ever used in my life. And this is an actual hardware piece, like you can buy the real rack mount unit of this. And it's, by all accounts, I've never used one actually, but by all accounts, it's kind of like a souped up 1176. But this is the first time I've been able to compare it only in plug-in form, so I'm not suggesting it's the same thing. I'm sure the hardware is a little bit different. But this is the most amazing 1176 that I've ever used. And so I would recommend you check it out. And if you get the code from Plug-in Alliance, this was $30. It's regularly a couple $100. Another Plug-in Alliance, this. I used to have the hardware of this, and I missed it. And it's like an LA2A. And for those of you that have been around for a bit, you know I love the API 2500 on my 2-mix. Holy moly, I love this for this tune even better than that. Okay, one more plugin by Kush. Holy cow, this EQ was designed by Dave Hill. It used to be Hardware. And Dave Hill, the same guy that designed this Crane Song compressor here, designed the hardware version of this, and then Kush, this company, put out the plugin. This is the smoothest, most beautiful 2-mix EQ I've ever heard. And, you know, for those of you that know me, know that I use this a lot, the Manley Massive Passive, which I still use because I don't have as many frequencies and bands on this, but this is just incredible. And a little tip about it, it has high and low pass filters, and they're in kind of extreme places. So if you want to actually go and do the Billie Eilish thing where all the tracks are dark, and you can do it with this. This thing is pretty awesome. You put it on every track and then just like cut all the highs. This will give you that sound right out of the box. So a few new amazing plugins. One other thing, when I mixed this, it had this really big, expansive, wide, beautiful sound, which I was attracted to. I liked it. And, you know, as an engineer, we always like our work to be big and expansive, but it just didn't have enough glue for me. And I just wanted it to have some vibe. And so I pulled out something that I've used it once on a 2-mix, and I only used it for a part of a song the first time I used it. Anyway, I used this plugin, which is Waves, the Abbey Road vinyl stereo plugin, on the whole mix, and I have the settings here. I made it sound like a print. These weren't the highest fidelity settings in this plugin. And I actually turned up the wow and flutter a little bit, which for those that know about tape machines, it gives it a bit of a ooh, kind of pitchy thing. And that's happening across the whole mix. But when I put this plugin on the 2-mix, the whole thing just kind of glued together, and that sort of wow and flutter thing gave it kind of a feel and a texture that I just loved. And it's very, very subtle, but it made the difference for me between this mix sounding perfect and sounding big and expansive, which, you know, could be perfect in another context, but for this wasn't. Okay, if you have questions, put them there. We'll grab them when we come back. We'll play the song once more. If there are no questions, I will just let the song play us out. Thank you so much for joining us again. I hope that you will come to the Y440 session a week from tonight about bass and bottom end and Ampeg and all those amazing things. And if we don't see you Thursday, then hopefully we'll see you next month. But if there's questions, we'll come back. So one more time, here is Siobhan's Think It's Gonna Rain Today. Let's go back here to the beginning, and here we go.
away, I sit and wait. This could turn to hate, or on another day we could find a way to keep our thoughts for. Thought I had it all, but I'm afraid to fall. I'm feeling like a fool who's falling for another tool who's calling. I think it's gonna rain today. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy, May. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say. I think it's gonna rain today. I think it's gonna rain today. Shot in the dark, won't get too far. True colors are, or set in the light, starting the right. It begins tonight on RESPX. I could be a mess. I'm feeling like a fool who's falling for another tool who's calling. I think it's gonna rain today. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy, May. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say. I think it's gonna rain today. I think it's gonna rain today. My emotions, way won't take the bait with you. I anticipate, not feeling safe with you. It's gonna rain today. I think it's gonna rain. I think it's gonna rain. I think it's gonna rain. And I'm feeling dizzy tonight. My head is so heavy and I'm feeling dizzy tonight. All the consequences, damn, I'm so restless, they say. I think it's gonna rain today. I think it's gonna rain today. Thank